What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer with BamaOnLine.com, joined by Blake Byler. And Blake, it's football season, man. I
Yeah.
know, we still got a month until the season opener, but we're sitting here Friday, August 1st. The calendar has changed. Alabama has held two preseason practices. Hell, we had preseason NFL football on the TV on Thursday night with the Chargers and Lions in Canton for the Hall of Fame game. So it's hot as hell outside. There's football practice. There's preseason football on the TV. It's football season, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Alabama's off on Friday. They'll be back to work on Saturday morning with preseason practice number 3. But a lot's happened in these first 2 days. Just basic spider pads and shorts, which is to be expected. They got to go through the acclimation period. But we've heard from Kalen DeBoer. We've heard from Ryan Grubb. We've heard from a couple of veteran offensive players. So there's a lot to talk about. And we've been at the first two practices. I think we've probably seen to combine maybe 20, 25
Yeah,
minutes.
about
I mean,
that.
30 minutes feels like we're pushing it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, day one, it's the first time we've been on the field since the spring. What was where were your eyes going on day one of fall camp? I know it is dictated by where we go. Just for full transparency, the first few days, we kind of have the same path. You see the linemen first, and as you make your way around the practice field, you can go to backers and DBs and then get
Yeah.
around to the quarterbacks and receivers. So you're a little bit limited by what's in front of you. But in terms of just where your eyes are wanting to go, what was that for you, Blake?
I think for me and really for everybody else out there, we all kind of drifted to the quarterbacks first. And I know we'll get to the quarterback competition and talk a little bit more about that later. That's kind of where my eyes went first, just to see kind of what order they were going in, if anything looked abnormal or different kind of from what we expected, which it didn't. And again, we'll get into some of that. But really from there, my eyes went to some of the players who were dealing with injuries
Mm-hmm.
throughout the spring. And we know that there were a lot of players, double-digit players, that missed the spring, didn't participate in A-Day, were kind of held out throughout that entire period. But like you mentioned in your practice report on Wednesday, all of the players that missed spring were able to participate in practice throughout these first 2 days. And that includes guys like Deontay Lawson, who tore his ACL against Oklahoma in November. He's out there participating in practice. He's got a giant brace on his knee. But, he's still out there moving around. And that's, a good thing as he works towards potentially being ready to go for week one. We saw Jalen Hale, who has been dealing with a major leg injury that happened about a year and a half ago now in the spring of 2024. He's got a brace, but he's out there moving. We saw Keon Sabb with the safeties. We saw Damani Jackson with the corners. Caden Proctor was out there with the offensive line. So a lot of different players important players at that were dealing with injuries in the spring. We're all back out there. And I think that was a really important thing to note and kind of to see on the first day.
Yeah, you and I are like-minded because, like, if you would have seen my notebook going out to practice, it was the notes, the pre-notes before you even go to practice were much longer than normal because I was trying to remember everybody who missed time in the spring just to see where they were. And you're right, they were all out there. Now, granted, they were doing things at varying levels. I think some
Yeah.
guys were limited. I know Deontay Lawson's at the front of that inside backer line, and he's moving pretty well, but I think they're going to obviously monitor him in preseason camp in hopes of getting him ready for week one. A guy like Damani Jackson's kind of at the back of that cornerback line after missing the spring. He's obviously not going to be at the back of the cornerback line when he's fully healthy. He's Alabama's number one corner. And then for me, like I did have the injuries in mind. And with that, I thought about the tight ends because that's a group that on 8A, man, they were using Will Sanders, who's an offensive lineman, as a tight end. He got a lot of run. I remember that 8A practice, like they threw him a pass and it was incomplete, and everybody was kind of jumping up and down because they wanted to see him complete it.
Yeah.
But it's a much bigger group now, literally and figuratively. They add the two transfers in Brody Dalton and Jackson Marco. You add Caleb Edwards, who's just a mammoth of a human being. And then Marshall Pritchett's back from injury.
Added a lot of weight.
Josh Cuevas is back from injury. Danny Lewis is back from injury, and those guys are probably going to be a little limited because of
Mhm.
what they dealt with. But yeah, it's a group. I think Marshall Pritchett might be the lightest of the group, and now he's listed at 248. And when
Yeah.
you look at like what he was listed at when he signed, I think he said it's even more. He's added, I think, 13 pounds just since the spring. So added a lot of good weight. It looks like a physical group, and that's a group that I think has a lot of question marks, but you have to feel a little better about it now that you're going into fall camp than you did exiting spring. And let's talk about some of those individuals because obviously we're looking at different groups. Quarterback, I think offensive line is another one. We probably could have mentioned the defensive line, catch your attention too. But are there any individuals when you're sitting there watching drills, you're like, damn, this guy looks like he's improved, or they catch your attention for some reason or another?
I actually think a number of the guys on the defensive line today caught my attention. And
Hmm.
the first day, I kind of worked around and the way the practice field set up the quarterbacks to really see them. You kind of go around to the back.
It's a
So the
hike.
first day, I kind of beelined for the back just to get footage of the quarterbacks best I could. And then I worked back where you see the safeties, the corners. And then you see the Wolves working in the end zone over there. So I didn't see much of the defensive line the first day. But then the second day, I spent most of my time kind of there at the front looking at the defensive line. And that's a very physically imposing and impressive group whenever you're kind of up there close and personal and able to see those guys. It starts with Tim Keenan, but we kind of know what he is
Hmm.
and what he brings. But I think you kind of go down the line behind him of guys like James Smith, Jordan Renaud, Edric Hill, even Steve. Like these guys are just like physically massive dudes, and they play with a lot of power. And they were doing drills with the sled, kind of locking their arms out and exploding up into the sled and then throwing it to the side one way or the other. And just these drills you see, you're like, wow, these are just massive human beings that are throwing this weight around. And so I just thought really each one of those guys were physically impressive guys to see. And that's exciting whenever you're talking about a group that doesn't have a ton of experience as far as snaps coming back, but you see that like physically, these are guys who can be able to make an impact as they continue to kind of get those important practice reps, get that experience, and get the mental side of it because the physical tools they all have it along the front line there defensively.
Yeah, it's something that like I know I noted in my practice report you had the footage on Thursday, and it's tough to gauge just kind of the order of things because you can watch one drill where they're all hitting multiple bags on the sled, and then they go to just individual like footwork drills with Freddie Roach, and like the order is just different. Like Tim
Yeah.
Keenan's going to lead that group. LT Overton is probably going to be right behind him, but then it's just like try to guess. Like they could
Hmm.
just kind of go through it kind of haphazardly, but it's a group that you don't really like the freshmen or the newcomers don't really stand out as much in terms of making mistakes. Now, granted, we have seen Freddie Roach get after Steve quite a bit to
Many
start fall
times.
camp, but I think that's good. I think that shows an invested interest in a
Yeah.
young guy like Steve, and he's coming off a JUCO season. He looks the part. I think it's a matter of when, not if, for him. But honestly, with that group, I mean, it's a group that stands out to me too because you look at that bandit room and guys like Keon Keeley and Cavante Henry, they've added good weight. I think whenever you look at just from the spring roster when it last got updated to now, um, Cavante Henry's up a ton. He's up 20 pounds, which granted, that's what he was listed at when he signed. He's up to 268, a big dude at that bandit position. And I don't know if I thought I would ever say this, but Keon Keeley's the heaviest guy in his position room.
Yeah.
Making that
Crazy.
transition from outside backer to bandit defensive end, he's up to 282. And that's going to be a fascinating group to see play out because LT Overton's obviously at the top of that pecking order, but you have Jordan Renaud, you have Keon Keeley, you have Cavante Henry, a guy like Kelby Collins, the transfer from Florida. He can play inside out. So it's a group that it's hard to single somebody out. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Jeremiah Beeman looks the
Yeah.
part as well.
Another
He's
guy.
somebody that could take that next step. But for me, like watching the young guys, like when you're talking about making your way around the practice field, you come outside from the indoor facility, you see the defensive lineman immediately. When you're making your way around, you kind of see the inside backers a little off in the middle of the field, sort of, and there's the outside backers. Justin Hill stands out as a true freshman. He's a guy that I think is going to be tough to keep off the field, and I think that's a group that's kind of thin. There's only 5 scholarship guys going through those individual drills. And I think it's a lot of guys that can make a case for playing time. Obviously, Quay Russaw is at the top of that group. You have Jamarian Latham going into his 6th year. Yanze Pierre's coming back and looking to take the next step. Noah Carter going into year 2. But Justin Hill, man, looks the part. And a lot of those freshmen, like we mentioned, the tight ends, Caleb Edwards and Marshall Pritchett, both look really good out there. Obviously, Caleb Edwards is going through his first practices being a summer enrollee, and then Marshall's coming off an injury, but they looked apart. And then at the corner, Dijon Lee and Chuck McDonald. If Dijon Lee didn't exist, like if he really was an alien like he looks and he was, on another planet, Chuck McDonald would probably be getting a lot of rave reviews in practice just because he looks the part coming in for Mater Dei. Those are two talented guys in a group that is super talented, super loaded. So we could go on, and maybe it's full transparency. It's tougher to see some position groups where we're located on the field. Like they'll mix it up too because they don't want to wear out the grass on one part of the field. They'll go to the far field where you're kind of like all the pictures that you'll see, or you'll see the Jack sign in the background. That's coming in fall camp. I wanted to kind of talk about two guys in particular that we've heard about in interviews. And I'm going to start with you. I know you wrote about it after we heard from Kalen DeBoer on Wednesday. Dre Washington, the transfer from Louisiana, because this is a running back room that brings back Jam Miller. You have Richard Young coming back. Daniel Hill was kind of a spring darling of sorts. You have a couple of talented young guys too, in Kevin Riley and AK Deer. But I think when Dre Washington committed, some people were left scratching their head a little bit. But based off what we've heard from Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, sounds like it might have been a strong addition.
Yeah, both of those coaches, DeBoer and Grubb, have kind of said that he's maybe not had the best 2 days out of the running backs, but he's been a guy who has kind of put his best foot forward and made a really good impression through the first 2 days of fall camp. And really, this is a running back room where you have your returning starter in Jam Miller, and then it's wide open after that, and you have five talented guys who can all compete for those snaps. And we also know that Ryan Grubb is an offensive coordinator that wants to run the ball and wants to run the ball a lot. So it's not going to be able to just be Jam Miller. And you also don't have Jalen Milroe in the backfield to kind of take up some of those carries on the downs that you're going to run the ball. So there are snaps and carries to be had. And it's going to be up to those last those five guys behind Jam Miller to kind of see how they sort out. Dre Washington is interesting because just from a body type perspective, he's very different than a lot of the other guys. Like Richard Young is 5'11", 215. Like he's got some decent size. Daniel Hill is massive. He's 6'1", and I
It's a
think he's
mountain
listed
of a
at
man.
240.
Yeah.
Like 235, 240. Like he is monstrous, like goal line back type power with him. But then Dre Washington's like a little bowling ball. He's 5'9", but he's like 215, 220 pounds. And so that's a lot of force coming from a kind of a small man coming at you, kind of built like a Mark Ingram type, like a small running back who's quick out of the backfield. He's got good hands. I think he had like 150, 200 receiving yards last year playing at Louisiana. So as these guys kind of compete for who that number 2 running back is going to be, it's interesting to see that Dre Washington has put his best foot forward here these first 2 days and is getting this praise from these coaches. And I don't know if there's, by the time the season starts, if there's going to be a number 2 back, so to speak. It might be a by committee thing. It might be a hot hand thing. Whoever's running the ball well that day, whoever has a good week of practice. But certainly interesting that Dre Washington, kind of unprompted too, is getting a lot of praise. It's not like people are in press conferences specifically asking about Washington, but coaches are choosing to bring him up, which I think says a lot about what he's done the first couple of days.
No, that's what stood out to me, is that like it is just off the cuff. And I think he gets forgotten a little bit because people are ready to see Richard Young. I think they're excited about Daniel Hill because you said like he's just a different back. But Dre Washington has a little bit of that home run ability. He's not a Jahmyr Gibbs by any stretch of the imagination. No one really is. But he's a guy that I think, looking at some of his highlights out there from Louisiana, he can pick up some yards. And that's kind of a good transition because a guy that is fast as hell is Rico Scott. We had kind of heard about this going into fall camp, but Jeremy Bernard, I just asked him, what kind of offseason has Rico Scott had? And he said he's ran 23 and a half miles an hour. That's the fastest on the team this season. And we don't know the context to it. I know Dave Ballew's not a huge fan of the 40-yard dash. When NFL scouts come into Alabama, they're not asking about 40s. They're asking about the numbers that Jeremy presented, 23 and a half miles an hour. And that is running. And so he's a guy you don't really put a lot of stock into necessarily like the off-season photo shoots, but when Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, and Isaiah Horton are together for a photo, the fourth guy in that photo is Rico
Yeah.
Scott. Like he has a decent chance to be that wide receiver four, and I'm really interested to see what kind of progression he's made because everyone's talked highly about him. Ryan Grubb showered him with praise too, and not only just his speed, it's his route running, it's his willingness to run through a person. I think that's maybe what people wanted to see, maybe from a Kendrick Law the last couple years. And Rico's also just transformed his body to where he's not quite Daniel Hill or anything like that, but he's a stout dude going into year two. So I think those reps in the postseason, getting ready for that bowl game when so many guys left, were beneficial to him, and he's really taken this opportunity this offseason and ran with it. And similar to the running back group, it's going to be fascinating to see how they kind of divvy up these reps at receiver because they've got 10 scholarship guys, and I would argue that 9 of them uh, look like they're worthy of some kind of in-game reps. They're not going to play 9 wide receivers. They might not play 7 wide receivers. But I think when you look at that rotation and how it breaks down, I think you probably agree with me. We'd be shocked if Rico Scott isn't maybe that first guy off the bench.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting whenever you look at the depth of that receiver room, and it's also why I'm just really high on that unit as a whole. Is probably one of the best units on this team going into the season. I think it's probably the best offensive unit that this team has because there's so many guys. You have the top three, and everybody knows who the top three are. You have Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, your top two returners from a year ago, and then you have Isaiah Horton, who was really productive at Miami. He kind of slides in as like your prototypical X. He's big, he's 6'4", like he fits what Alabama was missing as far as a starting receiver unit. But then you look at Rico Scott, who's had a really good offseason, and a guy who looks to be kind of the next guy up as far as a guy that can be productive and provide something speed first and foremost that is really valuable. But then after that, you just kind of go down the list. We mentioned Jalen Hale already, and he's still getting healthy, obviously, but he's a talented player, a guy who made an impact as a true freshman in 2023, caught a touchdown in a big game against Ole Miss. Like he's a guy who has gotten on the field before. You have Cole Adams, who recovered from some injuries last year, didn't get to play as much, but he was getting playing time whenever he
Mhm.
was healthy. He made an impact on special teams, is a really shifty player. And then you keep going. You got Jalen Mbakwe, who 5-star talent out of high school, started at corner, switched over. Two really talented freshmen in Latsir Brooks and Derek Meadows, who we've heard really good things about both of those guys and the impact they could have. So it's a really interesting unit, and I'm interested – like they're not going to play 9 guys at receiver. That just wouldn't make any sense really, but they have 9 or 10, 8 to 10 guys who realistically you could say he's going to be in the rotation. You're like, okay, like, yeah, sure. I can see that. So I'm interested to see who separates themselves, especially coming off of the bench to see who kind of earns those snaps. And like you said, it certainly seems like throughout the summer, Rico Scott has kind of been the first one to throw his name kind of in the ring there as a guy who's first up outside of that top 3 to be a guy to get some snaps and make an impact.
Yeah, 23 and a half is moving.
That's
So,
fast,
that'll
real
get you
fast.
on the field, no doubt. And honestly, it's probably surprising it took us 18, almost 19 minutes to get to quarterbacks, but wide receiver feels like a good segue. But yeah, to keep you guys guessing. So, honestly, though, like from a quarterback standpoint, there's not a lot to report in terms of just what we've seen at practice. It's been business as usual. Like we knew it would be 12, 10, or 15, 10, and 12. It's Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, Keelan Russell in that order. It hasn't really changed. It's basically in order of seniority. And look, we knew coming out of spring, we heard from Ryan Grubb that if Alabama played a game tomorrow, and this was mid-April, that Ty Simpson would be the starter. Kalen DeBoer echoed those sentiments in SEC media days, and nothing's really changed. And so, hearing from Ryan Grubb on Thursday, he talked about how, and he was just asked about the quarterbacks in general, if he could discuss all 3. And he said he thinks that right now that Ty is continuing to show a ton of command, that he's done a better job of that than the other 2 guys. And so he's progressing as a leader. I think that's evident just in everything we've heard throughout the offseason. So Ty Simpson is still kind of firmly in the number one spot when you're looking at a month away from the season opener. But I think what everybody's kind of interested in is not only the progress of all three quarterbacks, but like when are they expected to name a starter? And while we don't have an exact date, it's something that Ryan Grubb discussed. I know you wrote a story on it, so I'll let you talk a little bit about it. But I think he's ready for it, but he's also not pushing it at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, whenever he was asked the question, when is his ideal time to name a starter, he joked around and said yesterday, which would be nice if they were able to know and they were firm in that decision already. But they have a process that they know what they're doing, and they know what they want to do as far as evaluating these guys and knowing when the right time is to pick a quarterback. And it seems like Ty Simpson is still in control kind of the competition and still is the leader, is in the number one spot as we move into the next couple of weeks of fall camp, but he still has to go take it. And I think that's what the coaching staff is still kind of looking for as they evaluate these guys. They're not just going to say, okay, he feels like he's the leader now, so let's just go ahead and give it to him. I think there's a couple of things that they still want to see from Ty and really
Mhm.
from Austin and Keelan as well as they continue to compete. But they'll know whenever the right time is. I don't think that's gonna. I don't think they're gonna wait until the night before the Florida State game
No.
to name a starter. I think they're going to name a starter likely in the next couple of weeks during fall camp. But they're just waiting on a couple of things that they want to see from Ty Simpson or from another one of these guys. I go back to, you wrote a story a couple months ago back in May where Kalen DeBoer talked about the timeline that he kind of wants to go on as he picks his starting quarterback. I think he went on Greg McElroy's podcast in May and said that ideally around a week and a half left in fall camp, which I think that kind of lines up with what we maybe expect to go the next couple of weeks as they continue to compete. Perhaps name a starter with maybe a week to go, kind of going into game week and see what happens from there. But, like I said, and like they have said, still a couple of things they want to keep seeing and that they want to let play out over the next little bit as these guys keep competing.
Yeah, when you look at the preseason schedule, they have a scrimmage on August 9th, and they have a second scrimmage on August 16th. I think shortly after that second scrimmage, like if I were to bet, that's probably when we'll
Yeah,
hear
that's what
something.
I'd guess as
Like
well.
you said, like it won't be that Friday night before the opener. I don't think it'll be game week. I think they'll have that decided by then because they want to start getting ready for the game and give the expected starter those quality reps with the first team. So it could be before then. It might be a little after, but that's when I would kind of aim for it. And when you look at just what has been said about Keelan Russell, about Austin Mack, it's still good things. Like these guys aren't completely out of the race. I think Ryan Grubb's a huge fan of Keelan Russell. He talked about his uh, kind of vision, his ability to see the field, I think he said his innate ability to make plays is at a really, really high level. And then Austin Mag just being the big guy that he is, like it's led to some elite arm talent. So both of those guys are still doing good things. I think Keelan Russell is just his talent is there. He just got to learn the offense.
Yeah,
And
he's
maybe
a freshman.
if
He's
he had a
young.
better grasp of that, it might be a little bit more interesting. But we'll see how it goes. And look, quarterback, I get it. I think we've written like 4 or 5 stories on the quarterbacks. We're going to write a ton more.
Yeah.
And even when the season kicks off, because like if Ty starts that first game, he might come up post game in Tallahassee, and I can already envision that circus. But there are other position battles on this roster. I know Blake can't write enough about the left guard. And when you look at that one, though, I'm going to turn it over to you because that's your favorite topic. And I just joke because we have written a lot about it, and it feels like it's been Blake doing most of the legwork there. But it's Cam Dewberry, it's Gino Vandemark. But even at Thursday's practice, we saw Ulasalinen get some work there, and that's something I've been fascinated in because Alabama doesn't have a lot of depth at tackle. When Caden Proctor was out in the spring, we saw Ulasalinen get some work at left tackle and really kind of play with the ones as well. But he's getting a look at guard. that could be something that maybe we see a rotation with some guys. But Wilkin Formby looks like he has a really strong hold on that right tackle spot. So that really just leaves left guard up front on the offensive line. Just when you've written your 600th story on the left guard battle, what have you gleaned from it, Blake?
It's a position that I don't know if they're gonna name a starter necessarily.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be an ongoing battle, and the way that we really know Coach Cap likes to do things, especially with the right tackle job last season that we saw kind of have a competition going into the season. Like I expect these guys to continue kind of working in and out. Even as the season starts in the Florida State game, in the ULM game, Wisconsin game, like it's probably going to be a couple of games until we kind of figure out which guy truly has a hold on this competition. But they've got two experienced guys that seem to be the front runners for this job. You go back to SEC media days. Kalen DeBoer was talking about the offensive line, and he said we have a really good rotation of 6 guys. That would be your 3 returning starters in Proctor, Brailsford, and Roberts. Your assumed starter at right tackle in Formby, and then your 2 guys competing for left guard. That's like you said, Gino Vandemark and Cam Dewberry. And Gino's been in Alabama's system for a year already. He's transferred in last year from Michigan State, and he kind of served as the 6th man of the offensive line, if you will. He rotated in on those interior spots when there were a lot of injuries, or even there was an injury to Caden Proctor, for example, and they bumped Tyler Booker out to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Gino slid in at guard. So anytime there was an injury, they tried to work Gino in there. He's experienced. He kind of knows what he's doing in there. But then you have another experienced guy in Cam Dewberry who spent 3 years at Texas A&M, and he came in and has kind of gotten his body right and gotten ready to compete for this job. And so it doesn't really seem like there's any leader anytime there are coaches or players, even with Parker Brailsford the other day, being asked about this job. They talk highly of both guys, and they seem confident in both of them. And I think kind of what Ryan Grubbs said on Thursday was just that whichever one ends up gelling together best with the other 4, whichever group of 5 ends up gelling together the best, like that's who you're going to see win the job. And ultimately, that's just going to come with more reps. So it's going to be one of those things where there's not one player that's necessarily head and shoulders above the other, or that wins the job over the other. It's going to be something that they kind of know when they know, and they're just going to need more reps together as a unit to figure that out.
I think when you talk about like rotation on the offensive line, we've seen that more and more here in recent years, but we haven't been that used to it in the defensive backfield. We saw that early last season at the cornerback spot, and that's to be expected. You had all new guys after Nick Saban's retirement, but like that group now, like defensive back might be the best overall position on Alabama's roster, like corner, safety combined. But you have Devontae Jackson, Xavier Brown back. You have Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb back. I'm really fascinated about the Husky position. I've talked about it a lot this offseason. Deshaun Jones is a guy that started the bowl game. He went basically wire to wire in the spring as the first team Husky. But I've just been wondering, because they've added so much quality depth at places like corner, at safety, can maybe some of those guys get a look? And we kind of got that question a little bit answered on Thursday at practice. Watching the defensive backs, they were kind of broken up into 3 groups. You had your corners, you had your safeties, and there was a small group of what I can only assume were the Huskies. And you had Deshaun Jones, Dre Kirkpatrick, who Dre was a guy in the spring, basically was your second team Husky from practice 1 to practice 15, and then Cam Calhoun. We've kind of been waiting on that, wondering if one of these corners that they added, whether it was Calhoun or Dijon Lee, maybe got a look in the slot. And granted, it was just individual drills. We didn't see any kind of like, the back end of a 7-on-7 with the DBs and the linebackers, but just got my brain rolling, man. It's a possibility, and I think they have options there. The last one, really, I think it's one that didn't get talked about a lot, but it has here of late, really since SEC Media Days, is special teams. And
Yeah.
place kicker seems like it's Connor Talty. Long snapper kind of seems like it's going to be David Bird, who transferred in from Cal. And if you look at his bio at Cal, in which they could lie about this, I mean, you're just kind of taking them at their word. 2 years without an errant snap, you'll take that. He's got some power
Seems
forward
good.
experience. But punter, I'm going to ask you about this. You've got Blake Dowd coming in from Colorado School of Mines. You got Alex Asparuhoff, true freshman. I think he was the nation's #3 punter in the Rivals industry rankings, but he's a guy that missed the spring. Where do things stand there? We'll kind of get out of here talking about the specialists.
Yeah, the punter's wide open. And Kalen DeBoer has actually said that himself
Hmm.
whenever he was asked about the specialists on the first day of camp. He kind of said, he talked about kicker and talked about Talty and the experience that he's gotten, and mentioned long snapper a little bit. And then when he got to punter, he said punter's really the most wide open of those positions. And there are two guys who seem to be capable. I mean, Blake Dowd had, numbers that were comparable to James Burnip's punting average in terms of yards, but obviously it was D2 playing for Colorado School of Mines, and then Alex Asparuhov was the #2 punter, I think, coming out of high school. So a talented leg, a talented guy. But I know we were joking about this before we went into practice on Thursday, joking about the punter job and special teams and what people want to know. We're not watching punters while we're out there. So we might see them. They're also not doing a lot of work while we're out there.
Yeah,
So
that's the key
really,
word. It's not that we're not watching. There's just nothing to see.
no, that's true. There's not
Yeah.
much to see because on Thursday they were 2 fields over to the left on the field by the Jacks,
Hmm.
and not punting while we were out there. So it's really hard to glean a lot from what we see, but we do know what we hear from the coaches. And Kalen DeBoer says that job is wide open, but it's maybe one of the most interesting jobs, because also it kind of goes under the radar how important the punter position can be, and having a punter that can flip
Hmm.
the field in tight games in a league like the SEC, where every yard is going to matter, every game is important. You've got a lot of tough games, especially on the road, that can change the entire course of a game. And Alabama has had a real weapon with James Burnip, who's been elite over the past 2 seasons and pretty good his whole career. So it's important to get that position replaced. We obviously don't know that right now, but that's definitely one we're watching, with those two guys, an incoming freshman and a transfer, as we keep going here through fall camp.
It's pretty timely. Full transparency, we're recording this on Thursday night. Blake's done a good job of catching himself by saying today,
Yeah, I had
but
to do it way too many times.
watching the Hall of Fame game, like J.K. Scott's punting for the Chargers.
There you go.
Because of his hang time, he has led to a muff punt, and they recovered the ball, I think, inside the 10. So specialists are people too. And we'll know more about the punter position as fall camp rolls around. I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect the punter to be asked about on day one. We got a long way to go to the season opener, so we'll get more questions about the specialists. But if you guys haven't, go over to the BOL roundtable. I've got everything we've written the last couple of days pinned at the top of the board. It's a lot. I know Tim texted me on Wednesday night, and he was like, "I'm just now getting to read some of this stuff." I was like, "Well, buckle up, bud. You got a while. You might be up until the early morning hours. Ton of content. We still got a lot to go. They've got 18 preseason practices before the first game week. It's going to be here before we know it. And look, if I know they're off on Friday, they'll be back on the field on Saturday. There's a ton of practices coming up. If you haven't, if you want to check out BOL, you can for $1 for your first week. There's also a little sweet incentive. I think it's actually really cool. If you sign up for BOL or any of the On3 websites, you can get access to The Athletic for a full year. That's a pretty sweet perk to go along with all that we're doing as well. So Blake and I will be back at practice on Saturday. We got a ton of interviews, a ton of reaction, and I think we'll be back. Let's see. I'm having a tough time remembering what day of the week it is. And now that the calendar's changed to August, man, it's tough to keep up. I think next Thursday we plan on doing another show, kind of
Yeah, next Thursday.
recapping the first week of fall camp. So these will be coming out more regularly. Hopefully Tim and Andrew have some good recruiting news to talk about. But the season's here. We'll be doing these multiple times a week. And stay tuned, and we'll see you guys on the next show.